up. TheVegasLawyers.com. Lawyer up.
Hello, Tony Abitangelo, the Vegas Lawyers. I always get corrected. Tony Abitangelo, the Vegas Lawyers, live at Red Chimp Studios. I'm still recovering from my retina surgery. I'm not practicing for Halloween. I have to tell people that I know, and I've told them this, that I had retina surgery or reattachment surgery, and I'm not trying to be a pirate.
Right.
This is my good friend William McCurdy. He's here joining us live here at the Red Chimp Studios. Make sure you follow us on the Vegas Lawyer YouTube channel, as well as like our Facebook page. And we're trying to mix it up. A few weeks ago, we had a gentleman who was in prison for many, many years. And actually, he's here in the office today, and that's the gentleman I introduced you to, Lucas.
Yes.
Great guy, you know, misfortunes. And that's one reason it was a perfect tie-in to have Will here today, is because of his Assemblyman bills he had passed. He's going to be running for Clark County Commission D as in David, because Lawrence Weekly termed out, right?
He is termed out,
So
correct.
he's termed out, meaning he can't run again. So before we get started with that, I just wanted to say about William. Now, his father in 1993 helped me get elected to Las Vegas Municipal Court Judge. And that's one reason I don't like him now, because he's a big shot. When I knew him, he was a kid. How old are you?
I'm 31 now.
31. Jesus, Mother Mary. So you were like 5. You were like, actually, no, you were like 4 or 3. I mean, he was a little guy. Remember him out there? So politics has always been in your blood.
Yeah, it's always been in the blood. I come from a family of public service. You know, from my dad, he's not only heavily involved in politics, but he is also, you know, a pastor in the community, and obviously just very concerned about the state of the community and how we are working collaboratively to, you know, enhance the quality of life for everyone in all of our communities.
So William McCurdy II, not the first, because the first is his dad. He's as nutty as I am. I love that guy. He's awesome. Your dad's Bill's awesome. So let's get a little background. So you grew up here in Vegas, then?
Yes, grew up here in Vegas. Actually, where I grew up was, we call it the historic West Las Vegas. I grew up off of Lake Mead and J Street, and you know.
And that's where their dad's church was over there.
That's where the church was, and you know, I grew up in the church. I, you know, played drums, piano, and I really enjoyed, you know, living in the community in which I grew up in, just because, you know, there is a real solidarity in the community around, you know, not only what we share and, you know, what we, you know, experience together, but just the camaraderie and how we look out for each other. And
so let me interrupt you on that. We had, back when you were just a baby, my current wife, who I dated back then, your dad organized with the High Steppers.
Yeah.
You remember the High
Yeah.
Steppers? They're not, because I know Billy passed away. Billy Patterson was the leader of the Las Vegas
Yes, he was.
High Steppers. They were awesome. But are they still around at all?
The High Steppers are still around. They're still as amazing as ever.
And we had a little parade down in the west side, or
Yeah.
historic Las Vegas.
Yep.
And we were marching around to try to get attention, because we didn't know what we were doing. Trying to drum up literally with the drummers, support, and people were coming out. So I understand what you're talking about, the camaraderie
Yes.
in the community.
Yeah.
So, you know, so you grew up in that environment.
Grew up in the environment. You know, obviously there are a lot of issues in the historic West Las Vegas. Everything from high unemployment rate, well above, you know, the national average, to, you know, issues of, you know, folks suffering from drug addiction, to issues of homelessness, and you know, affordable housing is also an issue. So me approaching the legislature, I had a real firm understanding as to why I was going and who it was that I was serving. Myself personally, I was a high school dropout.
I was just going to say, because in Las Vegas, and people that move here and they meet people that grew up here, they always say, "Where'd you go to high school?"
Yep.
So you dropped out of high school.
I dropped out of high school at the end of 10th grade. I was a teenage father. Right after you know, I found out I had a kid on the way, I started working. I got a job as an iron worker in the Iron Workers Union, and then I went over to the local Laborers 872, where I worked on many projects on the Strip, from the Encore to Planet Hollywood Westgate, and where I finished at was at the City Center, where I managed as a foreman the Cosmopolitan and also the Veer Towers.
Oh, so you worked your way up, too.
I worked my way up.
So see, that's the other thing. People give dropouts a hard time, but if you have a work ethic
Yeah.
and a desire to move forward, especially when you got a young family,
Yes.
and you were young, and you're still young, age. But anyway, you're still young, and so you became a foreman and working
Yes.
in the union, making good money.
Yes, great money. I often say if you want to be compensated and compensated well, join a union and have a union job.
And they do quality work. That's
quality
who's building
work.
the Raider Stadium.
Yes,
They're all union hires, right?
Yes, they're all union hires, and the stadium, as you're driving down the I-15 corridor, it's coming along well, and I'm looking forward to hopefully attending a game or two with my son, and
Nice.
it should be good. But going back to my background, I after dropping out of high school and working construction, I went back to get my high school diploma at 24 years old.
So you got a GED?
I have a diploma actually.
Oh, actually?
Yeah, I went to the Las Vegas Adult Education High School
Nice.
and got my diploma in 2012 and hit the ground running. I immediately went and registered at CSN and got involved there, became a student senator of the West Charleston campus. Then I became the president of all 40,000 students at the college. And actually, while I was a president, we got a bill passed to help first generation, low-income students like myself be able to go to school and also be compensated for it and have the money to pay for their classes and not have to worry about the stresses that happen outside of school.
Is that what whetted your appetite to go for the assembly?
You know what? It actually gave me the confidence that when you stay committed to something, you can actually make change. And yes, that's what led me to want to go into the assembly. And it was
William
amazing.
McCurdy, just to make sure I mentioned your name enough times. The second, what was your assembly district?
Assembly District 6,
So you went into Assembly District 6.
the area that I grew up in and where I'm raising my family.
All right, and so you started over there?
Yep.
And when did you first get elected?
I was first elected to the Nevada legislature in 2016. My service started in February of 2017 in the
Okay.
79th legislative session.
Nice. And then you were reelected?
I was reelected in 2018.
Because we got a few bills I want to talk about too.
Yes.
That you've mentioned and that actually sponsored, which is even more impressive.
Yes.
So you're not just sitting on the sidelines, trying to get, especially on criminal justice reform,
Yes.
which is very important to the Vegas lawyers and the legal community, because the one nice thing about growing up in Nevada is, I said this last week or 2 weeks ago with Lucas, is the United States of America, and I'm sure you know the statistics better than I do, incarcerates more people per capita than any other country.
Yes.
And then Nevada used to be #1. Where are we now?
Well, I will have to revisit the numbers, but I do know that we are working to revisit how we are, applying justice and how we are applying the law. And some things that, happened this legislative session will provide more clarity as to, how many individuals we will have in our jails at any given time.
Absolutely, and that's where I tell, like when we're talking with our other guests, we're the top 3. So we're one of the highest, we're one of the places where you put the most people in prison in the world.
Right.
Not just the United States,
Right.
the whole world.
Yeah.
And it's too bad, because once you go to prison, your life has changed forever.
It is.
It is. So let's talk about what you've done. You run with it.
All right. So upon coming into the legislature during my first session, I knocked over 10,000 doors and heard directly from the community as to the policies that they wanted me to pursue. I often say that the best policies come from the constituents in which you represent. So what I did was, while I was knocking doors, while I was going around talking to folks, attending, forums and different events in the community, I identified 3 areas that we needed to improve. The first area that was, really, apparent that we had to address is the criminal justice system, and we needed to bring more justice in the justice system. So I got to work. I hit the ground running. I found out through being in the community that if you had a dishonorable discharge on your record, under the old law, you could never have your record sealed, and that is problematic for many reasons. Number one, if you were dishonorably discharged, that means that you went back and completed your term and you were obviously released, but you weren't able to seal your record after you completed your term.
And let me expand a little bit on that for the listeners. The law forgives. The law forgives people and allows them to seal their record, is what we call it in Nevada. Other states call it expunging, right?
Yes.
So what would happen is, if you had, well, first of all, the big picture, if you had certain crimes, you could never seal them.
Right.
Like a sex assault against a child,
Murder.
you can never seal those, just so
Right.
everybody knows. The next step were there other A and B felonies. That used to be 10 years, right?
Yes.
It was 10. C and D felonies were 7, I believe.
7, and in some cases 9.
And some 9. And then we had the E felonies, which are the lowest level felonies in Nevada. That was 5, right?
Yes.
Then we have what's called gross misdemeanors. That was 2.
Yep.
Regular misdemeanors, anything from like a battery and simple misdemeanors are 1 year. However, DUIs, domestic violence are 7 because they're enhanceable offenses. So that's the big picture. So you can seal your record. But one of the things that you could never seal under the old law was what William talked about, which is a dishonorable discharge. Now, what would happen is sometimes people are dishonorably discharged because they can't afford to pay restitution or fees, and they were successful. And they were put in the same box as the person that was dishonorably discharged for committing new crimes.
Correct.
So this bill that did come out, and I didn't even know you sponsored it. It was wonderful. And my wonderful assistant, Arlise, Queen of Sealing, sitting on our left, we were really excited about that because a lot of good people were having their lives held up on things.
Yes.
And especially people that it changed their lives. And for example, we were talking a little bit before we started the show, young lady had a dishonorable discharge from, I think it was DUI court, and all she owed were some fees. Something minor, right? It was something minor like that. And years had gone by, and what had happened was, in the meantime, she moved out of state. She became an alcohol drug counselor down in San Diego. She was even working with the city attorney's office in San Diego as a counselor, and was hired by the government, and to pass screening and all that.
Right.
And because of her dishonorable discharge for not a major reason, she couldn't seal her records. And her paperwork is actually sitting on my desk to re-petition, and we got to get off of it, but there's some other, get on it, but there's some other issues. So that's for the people listening, the big picture about dishonorable discharge. So why don't you explain what happened with the bill and what you did and how it benefited the community?
So it was Assembly Bill 327 as a part of the 79th legislative session. And one thing that we first have to do is, when you're passing any piece of legislation, you have to get all of the stakeholders involved, and you have to make sure that they have an opportunity to have their voice heard on the bill. Like, you have the public defenders that are up there lobbying, you have the district attorney's office that are up there lobbying, you have many different entities, from the central repository to the courts. Everyone has a lobbyist that wants to have a say on the policy, from the police and across the board. So the first thing that we have to do, get everyone in a room, have a discussion that's about, what's going on in this area. And the goal for me, as a sponsor of the bill, is to make progress.
And when I was in justice court, we would rotate chief judge, vice chief judge. You would get everybody in the legal community together. We had our partners. The justice community was sheriff's office, Met/Metro, district court, DA's office, PDs. So that's the way you get a consensus.
Of course.
That's how you get things done. So that's exactly right. So you're moving things along.
So we're
got everybody together.
Yep, moving things along, getting everyone together. And after, doing that, we had to make sure that we were talking to everyone, including, colleagues on the committee who would have jurisdiction over, whether or not the bill goes back to the floor for a vote. But you have to talk to everyone. No policy happens without everyone having an opportunity to be heard, voice their concerns, voice their support, including community support or opposition, and so on. So the result of this—
You can agree and disagree, modify.
Yeah.
Modify the bill, whatever you need
course.
to do. And if you have a consensus, it makes life much easier.
Yes.
How did that go? Did you have some consensus?
We did.
Or not some, but complete consensus?
Yes, and we also had some bipartisan support as well. And the result of this bill was that it was passed, as you know. Folks are now having their records sealed. Folks are, who were once waiting, 15 years or 12 years. Some of those times have been cut in half.
And that's right. Some of the 8 felonies were longer than the 10.
Yep.
Or at least Queen of Sealing knows. Throw out some answers for us, honey. Sweetheart, come on. Doesn't her crown look good on her?
It's amazing. So, you always—
So you're right. And so
yeah.
then, didn't they all go down to 5 on the—
Yes, they all went down to 5, and in some cases they went from 7 to 2.5 years. It just depends on what the felony was and what we negotiated in terms of making progress under Assembly Bill 327.
And I know, for example, the gross misdemeanors went down to 1 year. I know that was another one. And those are the non-felonies, and people need to, clear up the records, and also just explain to people that not only do the Vegas lawyers do sealing, aka Arlisi, Queen of Sealing, but we also have people that pick up new charges.
Right.
And you can't do what's called a partial seal. So if somebody keeps getting in trouble, you can't seal their records.
Right.
So we want to make sure that everybody understands the rules of the road. But once a certain amount of time goes by, that's where the forgiveness comes in, and so shows that you screwed up. You made a mistake, but you have corrected yourself. You're back on behavior. Right track, and away you go. Right.
Right. And I often say, your history is not your destiny. Although you may have made a mistake in the past, you shouldn't be penalized for the rest of your life for that mistake. The question is, how are we helping you achieve a better quality of life for not only yourself but also your family? And the role of government is to make sure that we improve everyone's quality of life. So this bill is designed to help those who want to move forward, and I am very honored to have had an opportunity to work with. I have to shout out the Judiciary Chairman Steve Yeager. I have to shout out our then Senate Majority Leader, now our Attorney General Aaron Ford, and as well as Speaker Frierson and many of the members of the Nevada Legislature in both houses on the work that we were able to do, including the governor.
And that's where, like you said, you got to build the consensus. Now, also here at the Vegas Lawyers Red Chim Studios, William McCurdy II talking about his legislative sessions, and he is going to be running for County Commission D, as in David. And, at this stage, there is no incumbent because Lawrence Weekly, who's a great guy also, he's been very involved in the community. He is termed out. So let's fast forward to your second session.
All right.
Those are some big ones.
Those are some big ones, and we didn't even hit all of them, but that's a very important bill to bring up and also inform the, and obviously the legal community already knows what's going on, but the general public who may be watching, we are working on behalf of you in the Nevada Legislature. And so it is important that you make sure that you're informed about the policies that are going through the process that are going to impact your life. So fast forward into...
Well, and speaking of one thing that you brought up to lead into people are always talking about marijuana. It's legal, I can smoke it anywhere, I can do this and that. That's not where we're going to go with this. But you passed a law, you sponsored the bill.
Yes.
And you said AB 192.
AB 192. So essentially, in a nutshell, what Assembly Bill 192 does, it allows for any time that there's a crime that's later decriminalized, like marijuana, folks who have those convictions on their record can have the ability to have a petition filed with the court of jurisdiction, and to have the court go through the process and have that removed from their record. Now, this is important for many different reasons. Number one, I'm a firm, supporter of folks having their right to, legally participate in what we now have as, recreational marijuana or recreational cannabis.
Just like alcohol is legal?
Just like alcohol. But we left a lot of people behind when we made progress as a state when we decided in 2016 to legalize and tax like alcohol. We have folks who are sitting in our jails and our prisons for crimes that are now decriminalized and now are legal, but they didn't have an opportunity to have their records sealed when we made a decision as a state to legalize this. So I found this being problematic.
Right.
I talked to a lot of folks in both houses. Again, worked a lot with Judiciary Chairman Steve Yeager, and we were able to make progress. So what this bill does is allow them to have that removed from their record. They cannot be charged a fee from the court. And
that's a big one.
That's a big
one. People go down the courthouse and they're scared or worried, and then they don't have any money on top of it.
Right. And we have a responsibility as a state to make sure that we're righting a lot of the wrongs of the past. And, there's no secret that, in the late, 70s, early 80s, 90s, we had this thing called the war on drugs, which disproportionately affected low-income communities and communities of color. So we have to make sure that as we're making progress, we allow for folks to have their records sealed and move on with their lives.
Well, let me ask you this, because the law now allows for less than 1 ounce, right?
Yeah, you can have an ounce on your person.
So if you had a conviction for a pound of marijuana 10 years ago, can you get that record?
Well, if you got a pound of marijuana, that's not legal. That's not what's now legally permissible, and no, you would not be.
So that's not going to fly.
No, it's not going to fly.
Or at least you're out, okay? So you can't steal that record or exonerated or whatever, decriminalized. But more importantly, what happens is you got people with weed convictions that are doing time, and that ties into another bill that we didn't discuss about the drug trafficking laws. it used to be 4 to 14 grams is a mandatory 1 to 6 in prison of everything but marijuana. 14 grams of 28 is 2 to 15, and above 1 ounce, which is 28 grams of a drug besides marijuana, was 10 to life. Judge Adair will always tell people, look, you're getting probation nowadays, or you're going to get this 1 to 6. But in the early 90s, these charges were way more serious.
Yes.
I mean, the convictions were having like 4 grams. I don't know if it was 5 years, but it was crazy.
It was crazy.
I mean, people were doing 25 to life out of 1 ounce or more.
Yes.
I mean, now it's 10, and then this year, are you familiar with that bill? Because I think Yeager passed it.
Yeager did pass that bill, and I don't know the specific details of the bill, but I do know that Assemblyman Yeager, and our judiciary chairman in the past 2 sessions, he has been committed to putting more justice in the justice system.
And that is what happened with the trafficking. Because if you get a couple guys out here on a bachelor party weekend, you're gonna, you get a half ounce of coke or ecstasy or meth. I'm not encouraging that, by the way.
No, we're not encouraging that. Not at all.
Not at all. But I mean, 5 or 6 or 10 guys.
Right.
Like I had a guy once, he was stupid enough to hold the dope for everybody, and it was 29 grams of ecstasy at EDC weekend. All of a sudden, he goes from being a fireman in another state to looking at 10 to life.
Of course.
You know what I mean? And he's just out there to party.
Of course.
As opposed to a guy selling the dope, and that's a whole different ball game. He didn't have the scales and the baggies and all that other stuff. So that's where it's really good to see and hear about these laws changing. Now, funny thing about when you keep saying the justice program is back in 1993 to 96, when I worked as a municipal court judge, Tuesday through Fridays. Gary had Monday through Thursday. So I had Mondays off.
Mm-hmm.
Darnell Brown, is that an old name? Does that sound familiar at all?
No, it doesn't sound too familiar.
He worked at KCEP, 88.1, right? Isn't that the station?
88.1, that is the station.
Local radio.
Yeah.
And Sherman Williams, was
Yep.
he? Yep. In Sherman, they had me do the Just Us program, because it was just us in the system.
That's right.
We used to do a live talk show every Monday. We kind of similar to this, and we'd have call-ins and take questions and talk about a variety of topics. So believe me, I'm familiar growing up in this town and the way my dad treated people and he represented and the people that supported me and got me elected. I'm familiar with the Just Us in the System program.
That's right.
All right, let's go to the next bill that you sponsor and pass.
Okay, so one thing that we know is that our justice system is imperfect. We know that it has flaws, and we know that oftentimes the justice system gets it wrong.
That is correct.
The priority for me was to make sure that when there's anyone wronged, how are we working as a state to provide remedy to those who have been wronged by our justice system?
Because it takes years, it takes money, it takes an attorney to be either appointed by the government, which is costing us money,
Right.
or you got to go try to find one and pay for it.
Of course. And what we found is through doing research, I often try to, separate feeling from facts. I like to operate with fact. And it is a fact that in Nevada, we have had a total of about 14 exonerations, and there's been a total of 175 years lost of those individuals' lives.
So 14 people who were convicted of a crime.
That they did not commit.
Yeah, and they're in front of a jury, and it goes through the appellate process and all that. They end up doing, on average, about 12, 13 years, because they lost 175 years.
Of course.
Right. So like I tell my clients, you do not want to get caught up in the judicial system.
Right.
It is a big machine, and it is tough to prove innocence. Because I get you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but these 14 people, we show that is not true.
That was not true.
And that's where it's nice to see when you've got good prosecutors. Because prosecutors have an ethical responsibility that no other attorney in the state of Nevada has. The criminal defense attorneys, plaintiff civil lawyers, plaintiff defense attorneys, they do not have the ethical obligation to seek justice.
That's right.
Because they have the power.
That's right.
That's it. So with this, what'd you do?
So this was Assembly Bill 356, And Assembly Bill 356 has a companion bill, which is Assembly Bill 267, which I'm also a co-sponsor on. But Assembly Bill 356 essentially allowed for any time that there is a person who has been found to be, guilty, but are trying to establish that they're factually innocent, they have an ability to petition a court to submit new non-DNA evidence past the 2-year statute of limitations. Now, it's very important that we notify all of our listeners and viewers here today that before this bill was passed, Assembly Bill 356, there was a 2-year statute of limitation, which essentially says that you have 2 years to prove that you're actually factually innocent.
And that's from the date of conviction?
That's from the date of conviction.
Which means once you get convicted at jury trial and sentenced, once you're sentenced, you've got 2 years to take care of that.
Yes.
That's almost impossible. Because I've done appeals to the Nevada Supreme Court, and now there's the Court of Appeals, and it takes 1.5 years to almost 2 years just to get through the normal appellate process.
Yes.
And that's just without new evidence or discovery popping up.
Of course.
So the statute of limitations has been wiped out.
Yes, and now you have an opportunity to actually prove that you're factually innocent. One thing that we found through doing research around this topic is that not only have there been 14 exonerations in Nevada with a total of 175 years lost, but we've had over about 2,400 exonerations in the country. So there's 2,400 people who have been, essentially wronged by our justice system, and they had a total of 75,000 years of life lost.
And that's it for the listeners. That's the people that you see on TV. It makes national
Yes.
news. They did 15, 30 years, whatever it is, and they're getting set free.
Yes, but here in Nevada, we're doing things differently. We have one of the best governors, I would say, in the entire country with Governor Sisolak, and he's doing phenomenal work, and he
That him
understands.
calling you?
No.
No, it's a different Steve. Different Steve. I thought he was watching. Hi, Governor.
But we really do have one of the best governors. But one thing that we did this legislative session is we, removed the 2-year statute of limitations. We allowed and established a process to actually prove that you're factually innocent. And it's important for that to happen because you have people who have lost an opportunity to earn. They've lost opportunity to take care of their families. They've lost an opportunity to just participate in what we call an average life.
Right, just everyday people.
Everyday people.
And also, as they talk about being institutionalized.
Yeah.
People that have been in prison for so long, they don't know how to function in a regular society because the rules of society, as once again we talked about with our guest a couple of weeks ago, it's a whole different ballgame in there.
And we have to do more to help people reintegrate back into society once they come home and once they've paid their debt to society.
Now, what you also were talking about was AB 267 with the compensation. Now, is that well, actually, I'll let you explain.
So Assembly Bill 257 essentially set the timelines and actually dollar amounts that someone will be compensated if they are exonerated.
Automatically?
So, yes.
So if I'm found innocent and wrongfully convicted, I get this amount of money automatically. It's not a question.
Upon following the process, there is going to be a process for it
Okay.
because with everything there has to be process. But yes, they will be compensated, especially if they're exonerated. Which obviously, when you're exonerated, everyone recognizes that you've been done wrong. You get your record sealed once you've been exonerated, and it essentially has never happened. However, before 2019. The law did not provide for compensation for folks who have been wronged by our justice system. So what we said is, if you have done between 1 and 10 years in our justice system wrongfully, you will receive $50,000 per year that you were wrongfully incarcerated.
So 10 years times 50 is 500 grand.
Bingo.
Right.
If
Nice
you-
and easy. Nice, easy formula.
Nice and easy. If you did between 10 and 20 years, you will receive $75,000 per year. And if you did 20 years or more, which we have had individuals who have, and I call this bill the DeMarlo Berry bill, Assembly Bill 356, you will receive $100,000 per year that you are wrongfully incarcerated. This is one of the strongest compensation packages in the country. And while it will not remove the trauma and the loss of time with your family and loss of time, raising your family, it will provide some type of compensation for that individual or those individuals being wronged by our justice system.
Right. I mean, you've spent 20 years in prison getting your $2 million check. Big deal. Where have you been the last 20 years?
Bingo.
Right.
How much has changed in the last 20 years?
Well, I still am having trouble. That's why Arlise is here with my Facebook app, because I don't know what I'm doing. So you can imagine.
Right.
And also, they're not used to the. I mean, like I tell my kids, when I was young, you want to get a record or a song or whatever. Record, that's even dating me. You know, you'd go to the store, you'd look there, you'd hang out.
The 8-track, you're talking about the 8. Okay, we
Right, right, baby. I had the 8-track going. You'd be walking, and, hey, how are you? Click, hey.
Right.
But you know, now you just hit a button, download the song,
Yep.
download a movie. I mean, there's just so many things that, let alone the time with your kids at their birthdays, at their functions, you know, the school plays and whatever. I mean, that's it. And you know, it's got to be a balance. And I also wanted to say about Steve Wolfson, the DA. He created the Innocent Project unit, headed by Dan Silverstein.
Conviction Integrity Unit.
Yeah, there we go. I knew he would know the buzzword. That's why vote for William McCurdy II. District Court, no, Commissioner D is in David, like my son's name. But yeah, the integrity. What is it again?
Conviction Integrity
Conviction
Unit.
Integrity Unit. And when I was a judge, and Dan would come in, I'm like, oh, geez, this guy's rabid. I mean, he was a pro-defense thing, but now he's kind of in a box because that burden is high. Because I've even talked about a case that's still pending, but I'm not going to get into the facts. You know, you got to jump through those hoops.
You do.
It's one thing when it's, you know, John Smith was an eyewitness, saw you, and that's you know, that's one of those you like to see.
Of course.
But when you've got other evidence, such as the scientific evidence, DNA, you've got confessions, because people say things in prison or jail.
Of course.
You know, young people are influenced. I mean, you know, those are the types of things you've got to jump through. It's not an easy burden.
No.
I mean, that's why there's only 14 people in Nevada that has been exonerated.
Of course. And we still have work to do. I mean, these are only a couple bills, a few bills that we were able to get past this legislative session. But what it goes to actually prove is that when you have legislators who come from different walks of life, you know, everything from business owners to, you know.
Well, you got the rural, so you got,
yes,
you know,
yes.
whether they're just a rancher, and I
Yes.
shouldn't just say just, but you know, I mean, they're farmers.
Yeah.
I remember, for example, my wife is very big on the animal rights and owning a tiger in residential areas.
Of course.
And, you know, the people in the rurals are like, well, they're worried about the slippery slope argument. And they're, you know, have farms and things like that. How far is this going to go? So that's what's, you know, I mean, that's what I like about the Nevada legislature. You have such a diverse group of people there.
Yes. And, you know, the people are, you know, bestowing their trust to us whom they've elected. And we have a responsibility to our constituents to bring forward their voice as a part of the process. So we came together from all different walks of life, and we evaluated many different policy proposals that came up. And I'm very honored that, you know, my bills were able to move forward with the signature of Governor Sisolak and, you know, our Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro, who was phenomenal, and also our Speaker of the Assembly, Jason Frierson. So we've made a lot of progress. And one bill that we should definitely bring up and notify the general public about is Assembly Bill 431, which provides for individuals who have, you know, had felonies on a record or they're moving from another state with the felony. As a part of our state, we are saying as a state, if you have a felony, you can actually vote. You have a voice, you've, you know, paid your debt to society, you are participating, you are a taxpayer, you are trying to move forward, and you should have a right to participate in our democracy. So Assembly Bill 431 allows for just that.
And that's that pass?
That passed.
And I know that's going around the country.
That's passed. That is actual state law.
Well, here's the thing. There's a lot of people that aren't felons that don't vote. So if a felon wants to vote, and believe me, I've talked to people in this office at Paul Pata Law and the Vegas lawyers, as well as other places over the years I've been doing this, and they're like, look, I did something 10, 15 years ago. I screwed up. I eat it. I admit it. But I want to still participate and vote.
Of course.
Then you've got these other people who don't have felony records, and they don't even want to be involved in the system. So I don't think it's like going to create voter fraud or whatever the concerns were.
No, it's not going to, you know, create any voter fraud. But what it will do, it will open up for more individuals who reside in our state to participate in our democracy. And that's what this is about, expanding the opportunities for folks to participate and also have representation. I mean, we're being taxed, we're reintegrating back to society, and that's what we want. We want to help you continue to move forward with your life. We want you to successfully reintegrate. We want to make sure that we are doing the work to decrease recidivism. And as a state, we want to make sure that everyone is being heard.
And when people, as the old cliche goes, have skin in the game, they do want to not commit crime and participate.
Of course.
Well, let's get ready to wrap this up before we go too far. I mean, because we'll be here all day at this
Yeah,
rate.
we have a lot to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
So, William McCurdy II here live at Red Chim Studios with Tony Abatangelo, the Vegas lawyers, running for Clark County Commission D. Why are we going over there and leaving the legislature?
You know what? Serving in the legislature has been the honor of my life. I've had an
Yeah,
opportunity.
he's 31, the honor of his life.
Honor of my life. You know, hey, I've been able to vote on such important policy. You know, everything from, protecting a woman's right to choose, to, looking at our criminal justice system, to helping to fund education, to making sure that our kids have the resources that they need to live and have a better quality of life as they grow old. In Commission District D, we have a lot of issues that are ahead of us. You know, everything from homelessness, folks entering homelessness because the housing prices are too outrageous, so we have an affordable housing crisis. We have a justice system our juvenile justice system that needs to have special attention paid to it, to looking at the lack of economic development or economic investment in lower income communities in low income census tracts. In the legislature, we passed those bills to help enhance the quality of life.
Okay.
As County Commission, I'm planning to do just that, and we will be focused on our social issues, we'll be focused on economic issues, and we will definitely be focused on furthering our work in the criminal justice system.
And you can do that. I know Lawrence Weekly, who's stepping down due to term limits, as we've discussed, he works with the Hope for Prisoners and John Ponder.
Yes.
I'm sure you're familiar with John and all
Yes,
that.
John is doing phenomenal work to make sure that we reduce recidivism. But we have to make sure that in Commission District D, that we are creating policies and we are working with our local government in both the city of North Las Vegas and the city of Las Vegas to create opportunities for more growth in small business, making it easier for folks to come here and do business. Looking at our social issues, we have to do something about mental health, we have to do something about homelessness, and it is our shared responsibility to make sure that we decrease those numbers. To have over 7,600 people being homeless in a state as prosperous as Nevada is unacceptable, and a county as prosperous as Clark is unacceptable.
7,600 homeless people?
That was the last count that I reviewed.
Wow. Because I'm sure most of them are downtown. And
most of them are actually
really spread out.
Centralized in Commission District D.
Okay.
Which covers, Main
and that
Street.
was my next step. What are the geographical boundaries?
Yeah, sure. So the furthest north boundary is Ann Road. The furthest south boundary is Charleston. The furthest west boundary is Decatur, and the most east boundary is at Christie Lane. So we have
a big area.
that's a massive area, and if you're watching here today, please make sure to go to williammccurdy.com if you would like to be a part of this campaign. This movement is about the people. This movement is about making sure that we all have a better quality of life, and we will make sure that we make change.
Love it. And we're going to wrap it up with make sure you support William McCurdy II, County Commission D. Great man. Known him since he's a little guy. And his dad's family are great people. And make sure you say hello to Mom and Dad.
I will.
All right. Thank you for
so
coming
much.
on.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Lawyer up. TheVegasLawyers.com. Lawyer up.